Thank you, Mr Chair. I want to begin by congratulating the Honourable Member for Coatbridge, Christ and Bells Hill for bringing this debate forward. And I wanted to speak in this debate because in my constituency of North Ayrshire, around 1/3 of children live in poverty, and it has the third worst statistics, the third worst statistics in all of Scotland for child poverty. And I think that's absolutely shameful in this day and age. And it matters because, you know, I grew up in abject poverty, and I know what it's like. And we have to remember, poverty isn't just about the lack of money, although clearly that's the foundation upon which all other poverty is built. It bleeds into every single area of life, and it's hugely damaging for the children who are affected, because it doesn't just mean a cold house, and it doesn't just mean going to bed with an empty, hungry tummy, which is bad enough and completely unacceptable in this day and age. But it brings with it a poverty of hope, a poverty of aspiration, a poverty of self-confidence and self-belief. Material poverty reduces and lays waste to all the things we want all children to have. It's life-limiting and too often leaves children who grow up, it leads them into a pit from which it's very, very hard for them to escape. And that still applies even if you grow up and manage to drag yourself out of poverty. It leaves scars behind even as an adult who no longer lives in poverty. And it doesn't vanish when you reach adulthood. Now, I've spoken in the past about how poverty brings isolation. Because with poverty, of course, you've got no money to access local services. Parents can't take their children out for a treat for the day. Not even for a treat. They can't go to the pictures, they can't visit the local cafe, they can't have everyday pleasures that ought to be part of every child's life. And it means that their lives are limited and their horizons are not broadened. So many things are out of reach for them. So that life limiting brings yet another kind of poverty which arises from material poverty. And that is a shocking indictment in a country as rich as ours. I will indeed.
My honourable friend, I know, was a teacher in a former life before she came here, and I'm sure recognises the impact of the cold house and the hungry tummy on trying to concentrate and study. And therefore these children will struggle in school, and that will impact on all of the opportunities of the rest of their lives.
Absolutely. The Honourable Lady makes an excellent point. The fact is that you're trying to raise aspiration and you're trying to raise attainment with one hand tied behind your back unless you can address child poverty. Children who are hungry, children who go home to a cold house, tend to find it much more difficult than other children to attain their goals at school, whether that be academic or vocational, it doesn't matter. Your life is limited in ways that it's quite difficult for people who have not experienced to imagine. Now, the Scottish Government is doing what it can to tackle child poverty. It's got a child poverty bill that has set tough targets to reduce child poverty levels. There's a £50 million fund that will support innovative approaches to tackle child poverty, the expansion of free early years childcare to 30 hours a week, a new Best Start grant to provide financial support to low-income families, and the popular baby box that gives practical support to new parents, and of course the initiative that's been unveiled fairly recently, the Scottish Child Payment, which is £10 per week for each child. Now, these measures, of course, are welcome, and they can ease the scourge of child poverty, but they cannot remove it. And they cannot remove it because in order to remove it properly, you have to use all the levers of tax and benefits to make the inroads required. Now, currently, the Scottish Government has power over 16% of social security spending. 16% is better than no percent, but it's far from what is required to tackle this scourge on our society. Now, it's no accident, and the Minister's heard this, it's no accident that the rollout of universal credit brings with it a spike in food bank use. In the last year in my constituency, 8,173 people relied on food bank assistance, of which 2,192 were children. Now, that is an absolute disgrace in this day and age, although I have to pay Huge tribute to the food bank organisations in Ardrossan and Largs in my constituency, who do tremendously good work against really quite challenging odds. But what we have, just a minute, you weren't here at the start of the debate, I don't know if I'm allowed to. Actually, what we have are people who are punished for being poor, and their children are punished as well and left without the support they need. And this damages the life chances of the children and their parents. Benefits, if they have to do anything, must reflect the need that people have. It's as simple as that. Now, we've heard today about the 5-week wait in universal credit. That is unacceptable, but I've got something very specific I want the Minister to take away and think about, and I've raised it before to no avail that I can see. But we know that while people have the 5-week wait for universal credit, they are offered, it doesn't matter what they're called, they're offered loans by the DWP to help them through that 5 weeks. And you might think, well, that will help ease the pain of waiting 5 weeks for the proper assessment to be made and the proper universal credit payments to be made. But I have to say to the Minister, anybody who seeks to take out a loan in the normal course of events, if you go to a bank and ask for a loan, your creditworthiness and your ability to repay is assessed, and that determines whether or not you will be given that loan. People on universal credit who are waiting for their 5-week payment, the 5 week without money, they're not assessed. They're given loans which it's clear that they're not able to repay, and the attempts to repay them shove them further and further into poverty and despair, and that, I have to say to the Minister, pushes them further and further away from the world of work. And it's simply not on, and it's not working. And this government really needs to look at these transitional payments that they call, that are actually loans. These payments should not be loans. People need this support in the 5 weeks. Now, the Child Poverty Action Group has said that it's time, and I know the Minister, I'm sure the Minister's aware of this, the Child Poverty Action Group has said that it's time for the UK Government to use its powers, as the Scottish Government has, in an equally positive way, in order to develop a wider UK child poverty strategy, so that both governments, the Scottish Government and the UK Government, can work together to make child poverty history across the UK. I can't understand why anybody would object to that, and I'm sure the Minister will want to think carefully and reflect on that today. But we have the phenomenon of in-work poverty. Now, the Scottish Government supports the real living wage, and many employers, with the Scottish Government's encouragement, have signed up to paying the real living wage in Scotland. And as a result, and I know that the Minister will be interested in this, as a result, the employers who have decided to pay the real living wage have reported increased productivity and reduced sick leave. So valuing people is really quite important. Now, the UK Government has sought, and it gives me no pleasure to say this to the Minister, but the UK Government has sought to deceive with its pretendy living wage. Now, nothing should be called a living wage unless it is calculated based on the cost of living. And the Government's pretendy living wage doesn't do that, so it should not call itself something which it does not deliver. And this pretendy living wage has led directly to this scandal of in-work poverty, which is absolutely appalling. Now, the cruel and austere policies of this UK Government is deeply damaging to and dangerous for children in my constituency, and it cannot and it must not go unchallenged. Now, I recently participated in a debate in the Chamber on, I can't believe I'm saying this out loud, on childhood hunger. And the fact that that's even a thing, the fact that it even exists, is actually embarrassing and shameful. And I don't know how the Minister feels, but if I was part of a government that presided over childhood hunger when I had the ability as a member of a government to do something about it, I can't understand the hesitation or the reluctance. Now, this government really needs to get its act together and take real measures to support children instead of punishing those who need support. Eradicating child poverty is quite simple. Eradicating child poverty needs to be a priority. It's as simple as that. It cannot be an afterthought. It cannot be an add-on. It needs to be a priority. And it cannot be considered as inconvenient either, because if we cannot invest in our children, if we cannot go to our own beds at night, safe in the knowledge that other children are not going to bed hungry, then we're doing this all wrong. Now, I want the Minister to tell us today what he is doing, what he is prepared to do as a Minister in this government to make serious attempts to address what can only be described as a scandal. And I'll make a commitment to him today. Any measures that he takes to tackle child poverty at a UK level, any measures that he takes, he will find support on the SNP benches to do that. Because Scotland's children need and they deserve better than this.
Yeah.